morning. We're ready to start a new week in Heritage Studies. So let's go ahead and get out your reader book and turn to page 110 in your reader. And you can also go ahead and turn to page 48 in your work text because you're going to be doing page 48 today. I'm going to have you do that yourself. All right, let's look at page 110. Now, we've already, last week, I think, we did a short introduction to this chapter, chapter 5, which is called All That Glitters. And remember, they called this time period the late 1800s, from like 1880 to 1890, or I'm sorry, 1880 to 1900. They called it the Gilded Age. Do you remember what gilded means? Lightly covered with gold. In other words, it's not very deep. Now, where did that saying come from, all that glitters is not gold? Who did that come from? William Shakespeare. And what does it mean? Just because it looks like it's fancy schmancy doesn't really mean it, right? All right, so if you'll notice on the screen, this is a present day picture of Ellis Island. I believe it is. And I didn't notice this, but for some reason the flag is at half staff, so I don't know when this picture was taken. But whenever it was taken, someone important must have passed away or something happened because the flag is at half staff. I wasn't aware of that. Let me see if I can find one. There's a good one. Now that's an old picture of Ellis Island. There we go. There's a good one. All right, so let's look at page 110. All right, we're going to go ahead and talk today about Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty and the immigrants that were coming in and why all that was important. So remember, you have to read along with me just like you're reading yourself, okay? So let's look at top of page 110. So immigrants poured into the United States during the Gilded Age. Millions of people came from other countries between 1870 and 1900. Immigrants hoped to find a better life in America. Some were looking for good jobs. Many hoped to become wealthy. Some came to find land for sale at a good price. Some came to escape famine. Others were looking for freedom of religion. Both the east and the west coast of America became landing places for immigrants. So the first set of immigrants we're going to talk about are immigrants from Europe. So most of the immigrants who arrived on the East Coast came from Europe. People came from countries like Germany, England, Ireland, Sweden, Norway, Austria-Hungary, Russia. Some immigrants moved out west, and some stayed in the eastern cities. All the new people in America brought changes to its culture. If you walked along the streets of a large city, you might hear several different European languages. I'm going to stop right there for just 1 second. I'm not sure what year, but it was during the Gilded Age that some of my family came over from Germany, and they were immigrants from Germany. And I'm just going to assume that they came through Ellis Island. I don't know that for sure. But once they got out through Ellis Island and they got through all of that, they were able to purchase a wagon and some horses, and they headed out west, and they ended up going to Springfield, Missouri. And that was my grandfather's parents, and that's where he was born. All right, so let's keep reading there on page 111. You see the Statue of Liberty right there? You might see shops selling European foods. Go in there.
No, Mama.
People from the same country often settled near each other. You might walk through a neighborhood where nearly every home held a Swedish or an Irish family. The U.S. government saw that it needed an immigrant station. To keep America safe, the government wanted to know who was coming into the country. The station would also be a place where new immigrants could find help. When immigrants first arrived on ships, some needed doctors. Some didn't know any English. Many needed help finding relatives already living in America. And on New Year's Day in 1892, the U.S. government opened the station on Ellis Island in New York Harbor. Annie Moore was the first immigrant to be received at the new station. Annie was an Irish teenager coming to America with her 2 younger brothers. The 3 children were soon able to join their parents already living in New York City. Several years earlier, the country of France had sent America a gift. It was a huge statue of a lady lifting a torch. The statue had been placed on an island near Ellis Island. The Statue of Liberty reminded new immigrants sailing into the harbor of the freedom that they hoped to find in the new land. All right, let's turn the page. Now we're going to talk about and read about immigrants that came from Asia. So most of the immigrants who arrived on the West Coast were from China. Many of them came to work in the gold mines. Later, many more came to help build the railroad. The largest community of Chinese immigrants was in San Francisco, California. The community came to be known as Chinatown. Chinese immigrants were not always treated justly. They were hard workers. They were often willing to work for less pay than Americans and European immigrants. Other workers didn't like to compete with the Chinese for jobs. The Chinese also had different beliefs. They ate different food and they dressed differently from Americans. They were often looked down upon for being different. The U.S. government would not allow most Chinese people to become citizens. In 1882, the government passed an even stricter law against the Chinese. The Chinese Exclusion Act said that no more Chinese from the working class could enter the country. Only teachers, students, merchants, and officials could come to America. Any other Chinese would have to wait at least 10 years to come. All right, so we're talking about these immigrants pouring into our country between this time. So millions of them came in between the years of 1870 and 1900. That's only 30 years. To you, that probably seems like a long time, but to me, I know that's not a very long time to have millions of people come in. So immigrants settling on the East Coast came from which countries in Europe? Can you remember any of the countries? Germany, England, Ireland, Sweden, Norway, Russia. Those were some places that they came. So what changed as these immigrants were coming over? What changed in the streets and the shops and the neighborhoods that these immigrants settled? You would hear all these different languages, and you might find different kinds of food and all that kind of stuff. So lots of things changed during that time. So why did the U.S. government need an immigration station like Ellis Island? They had to find, no more could you just come over. You had to go through a place because we were getting in. They wanted to make sure the people coming were safe people. They weren't here to hurt us. They wanted to make sure they were healthy people and they weren't bringing some crazy illness over here. They wanted to help them and find them a place, to stay and to live. So the name of the first station was right here, Ellis Island. Where is it located? New York Harbor. Do you remember the name of the very first lady that was registered through here, coming over from Ireland with her brothers? Her name was Annie Moore, coming from Ireland. Do you remember which country gave us the Statue of Liberty? The country that gave us the Statue of Liberty was France. I guess this is Ellis. I've never been to New York, but I know this is New York Harbor. And here is the Statue of Liberty. And I'm thinking maybe this right over here maybe is Ellis Island. I'm not real sure. And of course, then this is New York City on both sides here. That's all I know. I don't really know much about it. I've got a daughter who went to New York. She's got a good friend that lives there. But other than that, I don't know anything about New York other than just simply what I've read. All right, let's talk about those then that came from Asia. What was the country in Asia that most of the immigrants came from? China. And they came over on the western side of the United States, which would have been the state of California. Remember, San Francisco, California had the largest population of Chinese immigrants. And it was this place in San Francisco that was just so many Chinese. What did they end up calling it? And I think it's still there today. They call it Chinatown because there's so many, everything's Chinese there. So now, were these Chinese workers treated very fairly? Not at all. Just got finished reading a novel about the Chinese workers that came over about during this time to work in the mines, not the mines, the railroad, and they were not treated fairly at all. It was pretty bad how they were treated. All right, so what I'd like for you to do today for your assignment is I would like for you to do page 48, work text page 48. It's very short. Use those pages that we read over today to answer these questions, okay? All right, and that will be all for today. And yes, you've already finished that. All right, that's all for today.